Okay, this is my second time recording it because I went over 15 minutes last time, but anyways, starting off with my first paper, discussing them in the initial writing process. I began this paper writing and finding a topic that interested me, and I chose the moon landing, which I didn't know much about, but I wanted to find more about, and I went about writing the paper on my general knowledge of MLA format, including information about other cited sources and text citations, etc., while including examples and information you provided us with semester and during the writing process. My peer reviewer did provide me with good suggestions. She provided me with a lot, as you can see. One thing that was difficult for me and different for me was including information or images on the final paper, which I'd never done, that correspond with the subject of the body paragraphs that they followed. And they allowed the readers to have a visual representation of the examples I was providing. The sources I chose were all what I believe to be from reliable sources. At the end, you can see I avoided websites like Wikipedia to make sure that all my information was trustworthy and factual. In the revision process, I did not have much to change. I went about changing it based on the notes suggested in the margins. Things like erasing numbers before my works cited, rewording beginning sentences and paragraphs so they were more direct on the topic of the paragraphs, fixing in-text citations to provide and develop a local flow throughout the paper, and just make things more smooth, which I did and turned in the revision process. My second paper, The Consequences of Living in a Parallel Universe, probably the most challenging paper for me to write throughout the semester. I'd never done work with informal sources like comments made on a YouTube channel. Going through and finding the comments was amusing, yet difficult. In the initial writing process for the paper, I wanted to focus on YouTube's and videos that I found regarding conspiracy theories. I was very familiar with the YouTube platform, and I chose users that had a large following to make sure that I got a variety and number of people. As you can see, 27 million and about 20 million. So they both have very large followings. The conspiracy theory I chose was the Mandela effect. I had little information on it, but I didn't know much about it. I eventually found the examples I used in my final paper, those being like Febreze and proper spelling, the introduction of a popular Disney animation movie with Tinkerbell, and the well-known board game of Monopoly and the man that's on the cover. I did not have a peer reviewer this paper, but I did have some comments from you that really helped me in making my final draft. One thing that was difficult for me to grasp was focusing on the discussion rather than just the subject itself in the paper. And during the revision process, I had more to fix compared to my first paper. I went by your suggestions, and I did things like making the first sentence of my introduction paragraph more clear, proofreading and focusing on the wording of my sentences, adjusting my thesis sentence to strengthen my paper, removing numbers from my citations, correcting in-text citations, running through my paper through Grammarly, strengthen my paper, and going through the entire paper again just to make sure it flowed nicely. My last paper, my third paper, was on arts and its place in the current curriculum. The beginning process of this paper was one that's completely different from the execution process of my other two. This paper was in APA format rather than MLA. On my rough draft, I did use MLA, but then in my final draft, I used APA. And I chose the topic of art and its place in the educational curriculum because I couldn't find any that corresponded with my major of graphic design. And so choosing art gave me a wider range of different things that I could use to form my paper. I found all my sources on Google Scholar because they were required to be scholarly articles. And I did this because it gave me the largest number of articles that I could use. For the structure of the paper, I mimicked the organization and the style of the APA formatted example you provided us with on OWL Purdue. My peer reviewer provided me with a lot of recommendations, as you can see, all right there, and I ended up using one in my final paper of the solid thesis to draw the entire paper together. And in the revision process, I went by the margin comments you made, correcting things like citation, grammar, and punctuation, integrating my quotations more smoothly, proofreading my paper to ensure that everything is correctly phrased and not making assumptions based on my own personal views, providing more statistics to strengthen my counter-argument, and overall strengthening my entire paper. Let me see how much time this is. Sorry, I ran out of time the first time. Okay. The major writing assignment that I turned to this semester, I think reflected my writing, was the paper, Was It Really One Step for Mankind? My first paper. This is my strongest because I had the most knowledge with the MLA format, and I really got engrossed in the topic of it and found it very fascinating. I was very satisfied with this paper because of this. My extensive amount of experience with the style of writing, I knew the grade I received on it would not be very disappointing, and I was very confident in it. The major writing assignment that I had not representative of my potential as a writer is my second paper. I chose this paper over my third paper because though my third paper dealt with the APA formatting, in my second paper I had the most difficult time grasping the concept of focusing on the discussion rather than the subject itself. And I think I need to improve this rather than struggling with a simple alteration that is different from my norm, and I can focus on not having such a hard time. Overall, I think I have a variety of different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to writing. My strengths are things like attention to detail, the amount of time and effort I take when reviewing different sources and quotations to make sure they're reliable, being able to fully elaborate on different topics and not having a difficult time overall writing papers is something I believe to be a strength. And weaknesses when it comes to writing is not spending time proofreading my work, making sure everything flows together nicely, and my ability to do in-text citations and my grammar. I will recognize that as my weaknesses and try to improve. In addition to this, I also focus on my strengths because there's always room for improvement. My peer review workshops provided some insight as to how I can improve my writing and writing skills overall, and I acknowledge them, and I did think about them before turning in my final draft of the paper. And I did sometimes actually use them in my final draft, but not things that referred to in my grammar that my peer reviewers mentioned. I have not learned much about writing from reading things of my classmates. They are very good writers, but I think we're all on the same skill set level, but I did enjoy reading the things they had wrote. When I received feedback from you on my assignments, I always took it into account, especially when it came to my revisions. I tried everything in my paper in an effort to receive the best possible grade I could get. And I wanted to continue to better my writing skills, so on the final draft, during my revision process, I always took into account these messages you would leave at the bottom with my grade and the notes in the margin that you provided for us. Outside help I used this semester were typical search engines like Google and different examples you provided us. I almost always tried to run my papers through a program like Grammarly to make sure my grammar was good, to avoid stupid mistakes and stuff like that. I think conferencing with you in the first paper helped me a lot. I did not conference with you at any other point in the semester, but it probably would have helped me during the writing process I had to just answer questions I had problems on. Low-stake writing did not really influence me or contribute to my writing thinking process this semester. Just on my second paper it did because of the informal sources, but that was pretty much it. It didn't really have a big impact on me or influence on me. The biggest struggles I engaged with this semester with coming in my writing and research was first when it came to writing, making sure I cited things properly, using correct grammar, and making sure I had no unintentional plagiarism in my papers. I responded to these challenges by running my papers through programs like Grammarly, like I stated before, and using the examples you had emailed me after our conference about paraphrasing and citing information. On almost all my papers this semester, I used critical thinking. I had another class I was taking this semester, and they had smaller assignments, so I focused a lot of my time on this class because we had 3 major papers that were accounted for in the final grade and was the majority of the grades that was going to use be used to make my final grade in this class, so I used a ton of critical thinking when writing the papers. Let me check my time real quick. Okay. Different academic and professional texts I used and was exposed to were ones like informal sources, which I'd never done before. They don't have an exact URL or point of origin, which I thought was very cool. I wasn't used to it at all. And I encountered new genres and types of text with pretty much all my papers, but especially my second paper. I engaged in rhetorical analysis semester when peer reviewing my classmates' papers, going through writing suggestions and notes I believed could help them in their writing process, and identifying things like the thesis and conclusion and stuff like that. My papers required me to locate, evaluate, analyze, synthesize, and incorporate information from primary and or secondary sources to make sure I had found credible sources, locating different information in the sources I found, evaluating to see if they fit the subject I was discussing, and analyzing and synthesizing the information to find its best placement in my papers. I did not use different sources of technology other than electronic databases, stuff like Google compared to Google Scholar. I didn't use any like books and stuff like that. The most common form of documentation style I have had experience with is MLA. I had APA experience in my high school career, but not much. All my information was fleeting fastly with that, so I used the example from Al Purdue that you provided us to format my third paper. I have reflected on my writing after it has been graded for every assignment and paper, along with the entire revision process that I did at the end of each paper after it had been graded. And I always was sure to read my peer reviewer suggestions, read final grading comments, and just look over my paper as a whole after it had been finished and graded, and see what I did wrong and see what I can improve on in the revision process. The paper that had me thinking about writing aspects like grammar, organization, integrating quotations, and APA style frequently throughout every writing process of the 3 papers that I had in this course, and the aspects I focused on in all my papers was all of those things besides APA formatting, but I think it's the things I struggled with the most during the writing process. But again, using programs like Grammarly did help me with my grammar. And lastly, my goal as a future writer are to strengthen my writing in its entirety and strengthen my weaknesses. I plan on using things in this course to help me with my writing throughout the rest of my college career and into my actual career. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. Sorry if this sounded extremely rushed. I ran out of time last time. Let me see how much time I have left. Okay, I have 13 minutes. But, so I was trying to cover everything, and I have like 15 tabs open with just random stuff, so I hope I provided enough visual information as well as talking about information. So yes, this is my final portfolio. Thank you for this semester, and thank you for everything you've done for us. Yeah, I had a really great semester, and I hope I see you in person in the upcoming fall semester.